We are. Good morning, everyone. Sorry to be so late getting started, but we're here. Okay, we are. Good morning, everyone. Sorry to be so late getting started, but we're here. Okay, we are. Good morning, everyone. Sorry to be so late getting
It's on
started,
it's on
but
a
we're
repeat.
here. Okay,
It's repeating.
sorry for that crisis. Didn't have my headset plugged
Okay.
in on my computer console, and so I'm getting the YouTube feed.
Starting to do looping.
Good morning, Art. You guys, I have not gotten any gifts out to you yet. I hope to do it tomorrow, with my working on getting the packaging done today. Um, and so anyway, let's see where we are. Okay, so we're in this book, Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, edited by Mary Stein and Thomas Arst. We're in an essay entitled Appassionato for the Imagination by Russell Lockhart. We began this essay a week ago, and now we're going into a section entitled Jung's Imaginal Bounty. And let's see. Okay. Any comments before I start, Jordan? No. Okay. All right. We'll go on. Um, Jung's Imaginal Bounty. Looking back on his experiences recounted in his Red Book, Jung concluded, quote, all my works, all my creative activity has come from those initial fantasies and dreams, which began in 1912. Everything I accomplished in later life was already contained in them, although at first only in the form of emotions and images, unquote. It will take many years for scholars to trace the lines of development from the Red Book experiences to the completed major works. As Hillman and Shamdasani argue in The Lament of the Dead, most everything of consequence for a true understanding of Jung's work will need to be worked through again. This work is well underway, but no matter how rich the bounty of Jung's major works, I do not think this is the way to appreciate the Red Book as a guide for the coming time. We need to realize that what Jung was saying and doing, that the source of his great ideas and his creativity in relation to them was generated within the imaginal experiences of the other. That was what provided the material for his greatest works. That was the source and origin of his ideas. Jordan? You're muted, sir.
Oops. Yeah, the other to me is more inclusive than just the unconscious. It's not only the personal unconscious, but everything in and around. So in a sense, I think the other he's describing is that fourth character of the the AUM, and then the fourth character is the silence within, between, and all around. So I think that when he says other, I think he's driving at quite a larger concept, basically fully the Atman, smaller than small and larger than large, not just the unconscious.
Okay, I'll
A
grant you
possibility.
that. I mean, I grant you that it is probably the Atman in that sense, in the sense that you just said. Um, and but the point about the Atman is that it's all unconscious, okay? And what Dr. Jung said late in his life was, it's really unconscious. It's really unconscious.
Right. You don't.
And
Yeah. When you're dead or dumb, when you're dead, you don't know you're dead, and when you're dumb, it's the same thing. It's like,
yeah, right. And so uh the other is that part of the collective unconscious that we cannot address really directly or in a very limited sense because we are 1/8.5 billion of the collected unconscious at this point in time, and that's if you leave out all other species, which is probably not correct. um, and so we're conscious of what we're conscious of, but everything that we're not conscious of is everything else,
right.
whatever that may be. And Dr. Jung acknowledged that um, he didn't have, he wasn't connected there. And some gifted people, like tarot readers, like Jordan, um, can pull from the unconscious, given certain prompts. In my case, I do my painting every morning, and that gives me access to the healing power of the unconscious. In Jordan's case, he's doing tarot readings for visitors in Taos, New Mexico, and online. And what he's doing is tapping into his own unconscious to uh, address a specific pattern. Okay, there's a pattern in the tarot, and it's been pretty well set. That pattern has been pretty well set since the 14th century or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if we talk about the Marseille tarot deck, um, we're already um, talking about a deck that's that old. So, and that was an established deck, and so God knows when what cartomancers, what are they called? Um, people who people who are looking at cards or whatever, when did they start looking at cards such that they could have um, a completed deck in the 14th century?
Well, and I think really what happened is that regardless of who says when the first tarot deck was, um, I think since the dawn of time, we've had the visual language and the experiential language, not just words. So, if I pick up a leaf and go ooga booga, r, make some noises, but somehow it moved me. What I find more and more is that rather than even just the unconscious, I'm no fortune teller. And so what I find is I have a visual fluency, a fluency with the visual language. And that simply said is I'm I'm allowing nature to tell the story. And in the case of at my table, the person's inner nature to respond and bring that story forward so that instead of trying to guess at psychological concepts, I'm really taking them on a road trip and they're going, hey, that tree's cool, turn left. I won't say why. I'll be okay. What are we going to discover going this way?
Yeah,
So I mean, I only have one rule at my table, and I say it right at the beginning. And the rule is it's your reading. So at any point, you're like, hey, we need to stop for gas, or hey, pull off the road. Let's switch gears. Then I do. And
Yeah.
so I think the fluency with the visual language and experiential language, and that's pretty much synonymous too with your paintings. There's a visual storytelling and a visual experiential storytelling that really has no need of words. It's just at my table. I mean, my joke is that I get paid to talk to people with pictures, and that doesn't really oversimplify it or demean it. I think what happens is it induces childlike connections where, when you were a kid, you just knew, but you didn't need to footnote it in Latin and Greek and show
Yeah.
pony explain why or ask for permission. You know, you just hopped the fence and made a shortcut.
Yeah, exactly. Um, yeah. So we have a number of very accomplished tarot readers on our YouTube audience. One is Kathy Kerr, who says, I'm an avid tarot reader too, student, teacher, and professional. and and I have never done it professionally, but I can do tarot readings. And um, I think that they're, an excellent way to grant access to the unconscious. And so when I'm doing my painting, it's giving me access to my own unconscious. And my unconscious is filled with people, okay, filled with them. And so what happens is that when I'm doing one of my paintings, um, I get lots and lots of faces in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I think that lots of us have an experience similar to that. I had an incredible experience when I had my what was it? My knee replaced, and I was in the hospital overnight, and I had this vision of like a cribbage ball in Harry Potter, but about this size, and it was filled with the spirits of people. It was black in color, but it was filled with the spirits of people, and they were all wiggling around and doing things, um, and then it went away like a cribbage ball. And I find I get those frequently. I think they have come um, through heredity from our earliest ancestors who were seeing eyes and faces in the dark of the jungle,
Mm-hmm.
and they saw those things uh, first as a self-protection, maybe, um, because if you're in the jungle and you're not conscious that there's another creature there, uh, you might be dead in the next minute.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the human species developed from species who all developed this capability of seeing things. And so in my pieces, I'm now calling them Skip's mirrors because I don't propose that my paintings are um, an image that you will care for, that anybody will care for. They're for me, in and for my psychic well-being, my mental health. But when you look at them, what you will see is what's in your unconscious. Okay. In other words, it's a mirror for you to look and see into your own unconscious and see what emerges. And, um, I think, at first, modern art and abstract art was not appreciated because it wasn't creating a picture for people. But, very honestly, we have cameras for that today. And so we don't need photographs. I mean, we don't need to be producing photographic images any longer. What we have to do as artists is create um, images that access your unconscious. If you see a painting and you love it, it's not because I consciously created something that you would love. I probably don't know you, but I created something that I knew would connect with your unconscious very likely. And so when you see it and like it, that's your unconscious talking to you, not mine, right?
Yeah, and I think too, really good photographers have an art of the eye, and then their paintbrush is the camera. And so then their photography, it's not trying to make hyper realism or representative anything. They really have a visual poetry of feel.
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
a friend of mine's
Yeah,
son,
I don't want to diss photography by any means, but
yeah. I mean,
yeah.
a friend of mine's son, I mean, I can see a scene and I can frame a scene and I can embrace it in a photographic image, but he's kind of just, he'll look at the same thing, but when he clicks that nanosecond of that, he pulls more than even what I was feeling there out, and really in a sense births that moment. And for example, at my table, when say, someone says, I don't know, do you see a woman in my life? Do you see a man in my life? I said, let's not answer questions. That's childish show pony validation.
Mhm.
Let's look at your receptivity by entering the question, exploring the question, and seeing what the question has to tell you about how you are ready and receptive for that question. And I think what's interesting is then it reverse engineers. And also, it respects the fact that I won't read for other people, only who's at the table, because to me it's rude, invasive, it's
Mhm.
psychological trespassing, if I could even do it.
Right.
And I can, but the thing is, then you're fabricating, and they're not there. They are not there. And
Right.
so I think more explore the question, because then what happens, then question implies their interest.
Hmm.
And then when you enter the interest, explore the interest, you'll discover the treasure in, frankly, the trouble of that interest, and get to what they're really looking to embrace and connect with. Kind of like the camera. You're not answering a question by, here, I'm going to represent this. It's not an attorney, you know, and you're going to actually embrace the nature of it.
Yeah. So Kathy says we could do a roundtable live tarot reading demo. And we've actually talked about doing tarot at our confluences in the past. I almost did some uh, in 2022, but Jordan was coming to that. He didn't arrive, but he was coming,
Right.
and so
I kind of
so
I kind of busted that jam.
right, and so I hadn't really prepared to do it. Uh, I could have done it, but we did other things instead. And so if Jordan and Kathy will come the next time we have a gathering, we can do such a thing and we can record it and demonstrate some of the principles that we're talking about here. Um, but so anyway, you know, tarot readings as well as reading tea leaves and coffee grounds. I have friends in the UK who read tea leaves and coffee grounds, and um, they're scary. Some of them, and I visited my um, Turkish friends in. Let's see, must have been 2013, 2012, 2013. And and I had a coffee ground reading, and wow, she nailed it, and um, and very prescient in what she said, and
And I appreciate those kind of leaf and ground readings because literally you're using nature to see how you are influencing the nature around you by what's left in the cup.
yeah,
And I think there's a pattern language there, um,
sure.
way beyond
Uh,
Christopher Alexander wrote about in architecture or urban design, where it's there they just step right on, like attach a little train car of interpretation right onto what you left in nature there.
yeah. Um, and and by the way, that reader is the actress Pinar Ogun, who is of Turkish descent but now lives in the United Kingdom. And so don't go to Turkey to look for
That
her. But she's a very famous actress, and she did that reading. Kathy says we could read for ourselves and keep it brief. I mean, here online. And Kathy, we've done a lot of that in the past. We've been all the way through the tarot cards. I have read them and done years worth of videos on them. There, you can find those videos on this YouTube channel by putting the word tarot into the YouTube search. But I really wouldn't have any interest in doing it online anymore because I think the physical presence is very important. And when obviously when we do it online, what we do every Sunday here with Jordan and me is alchemical, but it would be explosively alchemical if we were physically in the same room. And
well, and I find with my clients, the better readings are people I've read for in person, and then online or phone is wonderful.
yeah,
Uh, Reading online via Zoom, it's it's not completely different, but what's interesting is it does feel to be, I guess the word is averaged for the first half of the session because there's kind of a quantifiable need to get to know each other,
yeah,
um, from honestly probably clairaudience, what it
yeah.
sounds
At
like.
the unconscious level.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you have to bring in the night eyes of the animals, um,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that takes long. It's instant in person. It's like if you step in the ring, you can size up your opponent in
Mhm.
nanoseconds and know that, oh, he's way too big. I'm gonna have
Yeah,
to find some weak link, um, and or in a reading, a matter of, I think people say, getting out of the way. The best way to clear muddy water is to leave it alone. So my two of my priorities are: don't bring my stuff to the table,
hmm,
and no power of suggestion. Because I've had readers who tell me this and that and the other, and I said, well, it sounds like you don't like yourself very much and you're going through a lot of shame and behavior. I don't have that.
yeah.
So would you please
And
read for me and not read from you? Because I don't need to stop and back up and go to wherever you are or go forward if they're beyond me.
right, and I was talking about prophecy in connection to my painting work, and um, I thought that my prophecy was saying that Trump would lose the election, and the problem, and we can't say whether um, whether I was right or not as of March and April of last year, because in July he was shot, and We don't know how that might have changed the collective unconscious in a random act by one of 8.5 billion people. and if that was in my prognostication, it wasn't. Um, I didn't see it coming, and one day, maybe a decade from now or more, we'll know whether those paintings were prophetic. But they weren't prophetic in the short term. They weren't prophetic to give us the answer to what was going to happen in the election. Not at all.
Well,
Uh,
and I think too that that speaks to, I mean, I think there are legitimate fortune tellers, and I think what happens is they don't have an horizon. They are foreseers. Whereas me, I'm no fortune teller. I have a horizon. I liminally feel over that horizon a certain distance, but that's really just seeing what's far out in the present.
yeah,
And that's in a sense equates to radar, even for things I can't see. But I always find when people live in the future, there's an anxiety, and they're 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 trying to leave now, and then when they're in the past, there's more of a depression, a heaviness, and inertia. So that there's this pendulum back and forth where your
right. And
your prognostication was what it was, and then any further event will you steer your car. You don't say I'm going to
sure.
drive to Dallas, and then all of a sudden in the middle, why am I in Oklahoma? Well, you didn't turn the wheel when that happened, and so
Exactly.
you can't just go on a limb. you know it's what happened. Well, you
Right.
missed the
And
exit.
you know, and here's the thing. Jung's foreseeing capacity was quite developed, and it was partially because he was having people in his examining room. He was doing Jungian analysis on them, and so he knew um, what was going through the minds of a lot of people, a lot more than you and I would ever meet in a lifetime. And so he said that, I could see World War II coming in my clinic in 1919. So the year after the end of World War One, he could see the coming of World War II. And uh, I don't recall if it was on this section or on my Wednesday group. Somebody asked me, uh, when did World War III begin? And my answer is very simply September 2nd, 1945. That's when it began. And, people don't have a full concept of history, but on September 2nd, 1945, Russia was invading Sakhalin Island, which was a Japanese holding, and they never gave it back to the Japanese after the war, and so it's still Russian occupied territory, and the Japanese consider it theirs. Um, but it's controlled by Russia and has been since 1945. And they did that um, right at the end of the war. Okay, they did it with 8 days left in the war, in World War II. And so, the Third World War keeps sloshing back and forth in different ways, and we keep reacting to it in different ways. And God knows where it's going. I mean, I said to uh, a Trump supporting friend of mine when Trump was elected the first time, I said, thank goodness my grandsons are um, not of draft age, because maybe he'll be out of power and he won't attack Iran, because I've always thought that he intends to attack Iran, and so there won't be a real shooting war in, when they come of age to service age, right? When they go to college and that sort of thing. Well, here we are, 8 years later, and my grandsons are of draftable age and might well decide on their own shtick to go um, serve in the military, and so they may not be safe. Um, I do think that there's a reasonable likelihood that there will be a war with Iran. Um, and it's partially because I think that the coming administration has a predilection in that way. Um, and, um, and, our Navy is in battle every day, okay, out in the Strait of Hormuz and in the Arabian Sea, and in the Arabian Gulf, and in the Red Sea. Our Navy is under serious combat alert every day. Okay, and uh, you know they're attacked by drones and all kinds of things. And so far they've controlled it, but you can bet if there's a capital ship that is lost, there will be a war. No doubt. And it's not like it can't happen, because it can. And so Jung saw the coming of World War II in 1919. Um, I can't say I saw the coming of, or the existence of World War III, other than the Cold War, um, for my whole lifetime, but it has been there, and I have to acknowledge it. And if people if some hothead makes mistakes, um, then we can blow it all away. If you doubt about this, just go listen to the Merry Minuet by the Kingston Trio. It's right here on YouTube. You can find it easily, and you'll understand what I'm talking about exactly.
Well, and it's the hothead thing too is important with all the checks and balances, because in the early 60s, maybe 1960, I can't remember the exact year or date, NORAD determined with a 99.9% level of predictive accuracy, they said, that Russia had launched an ICBM nuclear weapon. But what happened is that all the instruments were just picking up the sunrise over Siberia. Look, and the problem is, someone who knew time said, "Well, we need to look at this differently. What time is it? That's sunrise." So our computer is not, noticing a weapon. Oh, we detected sunrise over there, and everyone thought he was a kook, until 5 minutes later, someone walks in and said, "There are no objects in the air. It was sunrise."
Yeah.
And so, the fact that, someone's there and can misinterpret,
Yes.
If X equals Y, and then I see Y, then X must happen. Well, no. How many things can equal Y? Well, the missile launching can equal Y. The sunset at a certain point in time and certain weather conditions can equal Y. So I think the interpretive piece too is to remove the hotheads. So, it's not like, some fight on the playground that just erupts like July 4th. There are pieces that preclude that happening. And I think it's important not to over trust technology that way, because
Yeah.
someone there had their head on their shoulders and said, well, if I was over in Siberia right now, I'd be watching the sunrise. It's like, and that's what it was. And
Yeah.
that precluded a World War III active peace.
Amen. And, there's this one scene in the movie Patton, where Patton is arguing with Ike about whether the army should stay in Europe. And he said, why don't we go invade Russia now while we have the army here to do it? And um, and of course, Russia had been our ally for the whole of World War II. And, uh, Ike wasn't going to do that. But, in a sense, he was right. Okay. In a sense, he was right if they had done it. But
well, and that thinking,
we wouldn't have had the Pax Americana of the 1950s if he had done that.
right.
The world would have been different if he had done that.
And Genghis Khan comes to mind, the Roman Empire comes to mind. When you get in that kind of place, then you have to be mindful of the tyranny that drives a one world government.
Yeah.
Someone's like, oh, let's have everybody under this. And honestly, the only thing that would unite people would be an extraterrestrial invasion.
Sure.
And the thing is, the odds of that
are zilch and nil. They're zilch and nil.
Yeah, if they can arrive here and we can't go there, I mean, we're ants on an anthill.
If they can arrive here in some sort of force, with the technology to win, we're going to have a problem. But the likelihood,
sensationalist. I mean,
So by the way, everyone, the nearest star is 4 light years away from us. 4 light years. That's 24 trillion miles. Okay. 24 trillion miles. Now, Voyager, that has been traveling into intergalactic space for quite a long time and is still alive, is 15, I think it's 15 billion miles from the Earth after 46 years. Now, who's going to do that? Why would a being want to do that?
Well, and also roaming the galaxy, there's a whole piece of, everybody gets some kind of osteoporosis with long-term space flight because your body is now not utilizing gravity to stay dense and heavy and to the ground. I mean, your body adjusts because you're in a float kind of environment and you don't need the bone strength then. And you get, astronauts who come back and they're all wobbly like they've been on a bicycle for 100 miles because their muscles aren't used to holding them up.
Yeah. And Cherie says, don't forget who John and Alan Dulles were. Amen. And so folks, go study your social studies and figure out who John and Alan Dulles were. They were really scary dudes in their day. And another one is Wild Bill Donovan, who was one of the people that founded the CIA. So, anyway, if the experiences of the other hold the seeds of future development, as Jung says, then the crucial thing would be for each person to enter the imaginal ground and develop a relationship with the other. What these experiences will be, what will be required to host them and to engage what the other presents cannot be predicted because it will be unique to each person. The Red Book tells the incredible story of what happened when Jung undertook his experiments, his experiment. Its contents, as well as the fruit of other experiences, must not become an object of uh, imitation. One must seek one's own. Okay, that's the point. You have to seek your own. And mind you, um, all this writing, all of my classes on the Red Book, bada bee, bada ba, all of that is about a 10-week period in Jung's life. About 80% of the Red Book takes place in 10 weeks. And from December 25th, 1913 to about mid-March 1914. Other things were going on and got into the last book in the Red Book, which is called Scrutinies. But most of the action in the Red Book takes place in 10 weeks. And notice that Jung himself did not go back to that place, or at least didn't go back to that place regularly. Okay, he could have been writing a flow of his imaginal world for the rest of his life if he wanted to. But, um, then we would all have a mental health concern about Jung, right? But he didn't. He pulled out of it and then went back and wrote about it as a scholar. And people have been dealing with Jung's oeuvre ever since. I mean, Sonu Shamdasani obviously dedicated his life to Jung's life as a researcher, um, 30, 40 years ago, and then edited the Red Book. Thank you, Sonu, for doing that good work. But that wasn't Sonu Shamdasani's unconscious. That was Jung's.
Well, yeah, and I think what's interesting about it is Shamdasani is not imitating, he's elucidating. And so what's interesting, there's an originality too to his historical integrity as to
Absolutely.
get himself out of the way. And I love this must not become an object of imitation. It reminds me of Oscar Wilde saying, most people live a life of mimicry, mimicking others they respect. Their life becomes a long quote, be yourself, everybody else is taken. So, the whole, you get on a bandwagon, you become an ideologue. Well, you're not yourself anymore. The vehicle you're using to travel is actually not yours. And even like Debbie's statement about the idea of the disappearing path, if I can't see the path, I'm on the right path. If I can see the path, I'm on someone else's trailblazed place. And so to me, that comfortable with the not knowing while daily getting all my stuff done, I don't need to know up here in the head. It's
Right,
the yeah, it's the I know, capital KNOW, resonate.
right.
And honestly, then I can forget. Because if I have I'm in the right place, then that's probably the 2 weeks of the month where my intuition is on the wax and the waxing towards full. And then if I don't, well, maybe it's because it's weighing towards new and I don't need the intuition. I know where I'm driving. So I keep
Yeah.
going. And
And and Lockhart brings this says the same thing in the next paragraph. Jung
yeah,
says, quote, my science was the only way I had of extricating myself from that chaos. Otherwise, the material would have trapped me in its thicket,
right.
strangled me like the jungle creepers. Few would have the science that Jung had to deal with the experiences of the other. But my reading of the Red Book leads me to discount Jung's notion that it was his science that enabled him to deal with the experiences. Rather, I believe it was Jung's readiness and persistent entering the imaginal space where the other presented itself inviting Jung to participate in the reality of the other, to host day after day what manifested. Jung's Eros acts of engagement in dialogue and expressive works of imaginary imagery I call the Eros of alterity, the literal doing it. That to me is the crucial factor. When consciousness takes this form in relation to the other will bring forth what cannot be predicted, but will invariably, like dreams, bring forth the seeds of the future. Okay, I'll stop there for a second.
Well, I had written in the margin, developed his scholarship with the not knowing without dissolution by the unknown.
Right. And so, I'm of the belief that great novelists do enter the imaginal realm. Okay. And when they talk about having writer's block and they start using alcohol or drugs as a way to get back into that imaginal realm, they need to stop that, because there are many artists and writers who were, have tried to get themselves back into the imaginal realm and lost themselves and killed themselves, literally. Arthur Miller is a great example of this, as is Hemingway. Hemingway literally killed himself. Um,
Well, and I think the idea too is sorrows are great swimmers. So if you're trying to drink them away, they're going to be laughing at you in the bottom of the bottle. I mean, they're going to just like, okay, go ahead and fill it up the pool again, And so it's like, I think that also the thing about that is that when you painted and you had that inspiration, that was that moment that's never going to happen again. And so what happens is, like Picasso said, inspiration will always find me working. So instead of drinking or drugging, then, well, keep the discipline and ritual, keep driving, keep working, keep active. And what happens is then at the next time, when it's time for emergence of some kind of experience, well, then that will come. But kind of like grief, we all grieve differently, and we all grieve differently each time. So, I these days, I have no idea the trappings of when and why I get an inspiration, but I know that it doesn't happen if I'm just sitting there doing nothing. I laugh. My joke is someone smoking the narcotic of hope on the couch. If you have if you have the eternal embers of hope while you're working, well, they can flame some stuff into being. But that's different. And I think chasing the moment, well, that moment's always gone. It's already happened. So in that sense, they're living in the past.
Right. And Cherie has brought up some issues that relate to the Israeli war on Hamas and indirectly war on the Palestinian people. I'm not going to discuss that here. I mean, I certainly have my opinions about that, but I don't want to distract us from our discussion here. So, have at it, Cherie, but I'm not I'm not going to get into it in this venue. Okay. I may get into it in other venues. Okay. The Red Book, more than any other psychological document, lays bare the story quality of encounters with the other, whether in dreams, visions, fantasies, or active imaginations, including the expression of images, which are stories stopped in time. The importance of this is ignored, as most everyone wants to turn these experiences into other stories called explanations, interpretations, understanding, and I would say mansplaining, right? These are stories too, though clothing them in scientific garb disguises their nature. When this happens, we drop out of engaging psyche's unique stories. This can only be done through continuing the story by becoming participants, characters in the stories, by following what is next. Um, this ongoingness and the immersion in stories are clear in the Red Book and are a major aspect of the power and dramatic draw of the Red Book. This is the art not only of the Red Book itself, but the art that Jung engaged in with the living presence of the other. As Robert Olen Butler says, art does not come from ideas. Art does not come from the mind. Art comes from the place where you dream.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and yeah,
right. So when I think of Caravaggio's painting of the dead horse after a battle, he painted this really garish painting, which always sticks in my mind, of a dead horse. He's showing something that is from his unconscious about that scene. Okay, and um, whether or not he creates a true image, and obviously when people take a photograph of a war, it can change everything. For example, in the Vietnam War, the famous story of the little girl running toward the cameraman, and she's naked, and her back is literally in flame at that moment, because she's been napalmed. That little girl survived, um, and tells her story, to all who will listen even today. Um, but that photograph changed a lot of minds about the Vietnam War,
mhm.
right? And it had a huge unconscious impact on what was going on. Okay, so it all relates to the unconscious. And so nowadays, when I go to a museum, an art museum particularly, um, I go with my guard up. The reason being that I know that I'm going to be inundated by images of different things in different contexts. And and it can be too much. I mean, a lot of people I've heard that a lot of people go through museums in tears. Well, yeah, I mean, I can understand how that would happen. Um, so the next section of this essay, and I guess it's the last section, is entitled Jung's Anantiodromia and the Coming Guest. Now, the guest that they're referring to in this case is the unconscious, okay, um, and so the famous Greek story of Philemon and Bacchus is, how two humans, old humans, um, welcomed Zeus and one other god, I forget which one, uh, for a visit, and um, other people in the community wouldn't give them lodging. Zeus manifested as a physical being, and he wasn't given lodging at numerous places. And finally, Philemon and Bacchus um, not only gave them lodging, but gave them a good dinner and um, offered to they offered to slay their goose as a result of it. But that the significance of that story is obviously replicated in Jung putting over his doorway, called or not God, called, God will be present. And so vis-a-vis all of the world's religions that refer to God per se, um, they all have a certain image in mind. But the truth is that every image that they put forth is not the real image of God. It isn't. And this is why the Muslims get so upset um, when when people try to create an image of the Prophet, peace be upon him, because the Muslims feel that he was a manifestation of the divine, and that the Quran, which he wrote in large part, was a manifestation of the divine, and therefore it cannot be put into imagery. He cannot be put into imagery, and
Well, in that sense, the whole thing is a big symbol. I mean,
right,
the capital W word wasn't, a word in the dictionary. It was a glyph, a symbol, a generative, like the whole dynamism of the universe exists in one intuition. It's just a fractal tiny thing. Reasons are unreasonable. It's capital N nature. And I think that's the reaction response there too, is you can't express all, because then if you did, even it's all plus that expression of all, and that's not the all. It's an n plus one, which is kind of illogically correct.
all right. So let's go on, because we have 4 pages left in this essay. So Jung's Enantiodromia and the Coming Guest. In 1982, I suggested that one of the major keys to understanding the meaning and purpose of Jung's work lies in his September 2nd, 1960 letter to Sir Herbert Reed. Now that the Red Book is available, I suggest this letter is also an essential key to understanding the implications of the Red Book, as well as to how it may serve as a guide to navigating the future. The occasion of Jung's writing to Reed was Jung's appreciation for Reed's essay entitled, quote, The Art of Art Criticism, unquote, published along with others' tributes celebrating Jung's 85th birthday. The letter is long and complex because Jung seemed to write in different voices in the letter. The first 4 paragraphs are a reprise of Jung's familiar scold against modern art, with an emphasis on Joyce and Picasso. To the 5th paragraph, Jung becomes more reflective, ending the paragraph with a crucial question. The great problem of our time is that we don't understand what is happening to the world. We are confronted with the darkness of the soul, the unconscious. It sends up its dark and unrecognizable urges. It hollows out and hacks up the shapes of our culture and its historical documents. We have no dominance. I'm sorry. It's a historical dominance. We have no dominance anymore. They are in the future. Our values are shifting. Everything loses its certainty, even sanctimonious Sanctus me casualitas was descended from the throne of the axioma and has become a mere field of probability. Who is the awe-inspiring guest who knows at our who knocks at our door so pretentiously? Okay, who is the guest that's knocking at the door? Remember that um, we're coming to this area, but remember that Jung had the pilgrims, the who were Anabaptists, uh, came to his door and knocked on his door pretentiously, but they were in Jung's imagination. They weren't physically there. And so one of the hard parts of following Jung's writing is that very often he's not telling you which side he's talking from, the physical side or the imaginal side.
Mm-hmm.
That's an issue. Okay.
Well, it's interesting. I remember my first watercolor, and I made up this symbol. I'd never seen it before, I thought. And someone walks up and said, "Hey, why is the Hebrew resh character backwards?"
Mhm.
And I looked at it and I went, "Oh, so in the darker ones, I'm inside looking out, and in the lighter ones, I'm outside looking in." And and it was interesting because to me, I was just experiencing what I'm experiencing, but it gave me a reference point
Yeah.
of, am I moving out or am I moving in? And then am I expressing the visual from that perspective? And I just laughed and I went, "Oh, it is a resh, but it's upside down and backwards." And they're like, "Yeah, because you're like you painted it on your window, but then you went outside and you looked at it, you
Yeah,
turned it
yeah.
upside down."
And 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 that's the exciting thing from a psychological point of view. It's this exciting thing about um, living at this time, and that is that we now can see how the American, or not the American, the human mind developed over millions of years. And it's like archaeology, but as we look at ourselves in this way, um, we realize that we're, really not that much different. Okay.
Well,
We're
completely. And
pretty
what
much
I
the
think
same.
what struck me is so wonderful is that the whole, well, you need to get outside yourself. You need to have a third person perspective. Well, that's kind of difficult because you're still you. So how are you doing that? And but then I realized I was visually expressing by just a cue of, it's a lighter painting. I was outside looking in.
Yeah.
And if it's a darker painting, I wasn't third person perspective. I was personally expressing. So it's interesting to me, the lighter ones were reflective and the darker ones were introspective sharing. So it's interesting. I think just like, yeah, how does the mind, what is it, in the 70s or the 80s, the commercial for the United Negro College Fund, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. And I used to always say, my mind's just a terrible thing. And so,
Yeah. Um, okay, Roberta. Roberta is writing to us from Portugal, and she says, "I made it, and just in time by the sound of it, because talking of Islam, and thank you for the insightful information regarding this religion. Good afternoon from Portugal." And so, Roberta, we're going to try to resist getting um,
yeah.
into any debate about Islam, but please, as you probably know from many of these meetings, I uh, have a lot of respect, a huge amount of respect for Islam per se. I don't have respect for those people who twist Islam or twist Christianity for power purposes, for their
Mhm.
power, for their personal power. Um,
Some of
But
the most deadly and vicious forces throughout history have been in the name of religion.
yeah, absolutely.
Just
And
facts.
I'm an American because um, my ancestors um, left Holland in the middle of the 80 Years' War, which was a war between Protestants and Catholics. And somehow since then, 1625, that was, um, since then, we've managed to bury the hatchet about in the battle between you know, Protestants and Catholics. We simply coexist and accept one another, I think. I don't think the Catholics are trying to convert any Protestants anymore, and I don't think any Protestants are trying or could succeed in converting Catholics, aside from, marriage requirements or something
Well,
like that.
it's interesting. This may sound sacrilege, but I remember third grade, um, my mom moving me into a private school because
Uh,
the public education system in Southern Texas was no, they wanted to skip me from third to sixth grade, but I wasn't that smart. It was just that everything they were teaching I had done the year before we moved. So I'm Methodist, Protestant, and I'm put in a Catholic private school, and with military discipline, taskmaster nuns, and you have to go to mass every week. And I remember not understanding, and this is the potentially sacrilegious part or heretical part. I remember having to stand the whole time, which was tiring for a third-year-old to sit there and stand still for an hour and a half or whatever. But everyone else got to go up and eat and drink and come back and rest. And my mom said, no, they're going up for communion and coming to kneel in prayer. I'm like, yeah, but I didn't get anything, and I didn't get to rest. So, it's like if I started to kneel, they're like, you can't kneel because you haven't had communion, you haven't been purified. And so, in third grade, my mind was all, tossed into knots because it was just unfair. Well, I didn't realize that, well, because I wasn't of their religion, I wasn't allowed to participate. But that was odd because I was required to go. So, I look back now and realize the farce of the whole thing because I was approaching it from logic. And why am I discriminated against? Why don't I get to eat and drink and rest? And it's like, no, you don't get to take our communion and you don't get to pray in our presence. So I think I can take that as a seed of be careful to not believe everything you think,
yeah.
because sometimes you just aren't in the right context to actually utilize what you're thinking.
So Roberta says, I haven't am around Islamic folks these last years. I've seen and observed different versions, spent 6 months in Istanbul, including Ramadan, and where I am currently in Portugal, presumably. And of course, especially Southern Europe has a long tradition in dealing with Islam, going back thousands of years, because Muslim warriors did cross the Strait of Gibraltar and came into Europe and actually controlled Spain until, I don't know, 1650 or so. I don't remember
Mm-hmm.
exactly. I think there's a famous movie about this called El Cid, C-I-D, El Cid,
Mm-hmm.
with Charlton Heston playing the part. Um, but there's lots of um, in, interactions back and forth over many, many centuries, um, and most of them have been peaceful. and where they're not peaceful, they're not Islam and they're not Christianity. They're people that are power tripping, using the religions. So anyway,
Yeah,
okay.
be careful too of banners. I mean, it's
Yeah.
when someone tries to make a huge marketing statement and they're really overzealous. It's kind of like someone resisting when or getting really triggered off by when something's said. It's like, oh, they doth protest too much, which is a confession. It's also a confession when someone comes in all overboard with their slogans, where they're trying to herd like livestock people, and it's best just to kind of wince and say no. I mean,
Yeah, and Shuri and Roberta make a very good point about Constantine. Shuri asks, why did Constantine become a Christian? And Roberta says, I ought to know that about Constantine. I can't quite recall. And let's see. Well, okay, my recollection is, or the reason, because I do know the answer, is that Constantine was in a battle, and at some point in the battle, he saw in the clouds a cross. Okay, it was presumably formed by the clouds, but um, but he took that as an indication that God supported Constantine in the battle, and that Constantine should become a Christian. And so, therefore, Constantinople, today Istanbul, became the center of the Christian world for more than 1,000 years, and
and was welcoming to all different kinds of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you don't know about this, you really need to go see the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, because it was a church that was built. It's a cathedral that, you look at Notre Dame, and they repaired Notre Dame in 5 years, but uh, the Hagia Sophia was built in 5 years, and which is very unusual, because most cathedrals in Europe took 100 years to build. They were three-generational buildings,
And with
and
no OSHA scaffolding,
right, and no scaffolding. They had no scaffolding, and they built a dome in the Hagia Sophia, which is larger than, or was the largest dome in the world. They built it in the 550, in the 6th century. Okay, so 550-ish, and they built this dome that was the largest dome in the world until St. Peter's was built. Um, and
And the construction technique was vastly interesting because instead of scaffolding, they just piled in
yeah,
dirt, put the stones, piled in dirt higher, put the stones. And then after they finished, they excavated and took out all the dirt, the sand.
right.
And
And the exciting part of that is that you can still see that construction technology in the Hagia Sophia itself.
yeah,
Okay, that they have the ramps. They saved the ramps that went down or went up into the higher levels of the church.
right.
And so you can still see those, and it's very convincing.
Yeah.
um,
Which is
let's see.
interesting because instead of heights and danger, you're always at the top until you're done.
Right. You are always at the top of the thought. Okay,
Yeah.
reading on. Jung returns to his antagonism against modern art by saying that the creative artist will not trust it. That is what the awe-inspiring guest presents. I do not think this is true, but is an example of Jung's complex continuing to speak. The rest of the paragraph continues in this vein. The next paragraph brings Jung to express what I consider to be the central key to Jung's published work, including the Red Book. Quote, "We have simply got to listen to what the psyche spontaneously says to us, what the dream, which is not manufactured by us, says is just so. It is the great dream which has always spoken through the artist as a mouthpiece. All his love and passion, his values, flow toward the coming guest to proclaim his arrival," unquote. Here we have an extraordinary conception of the artist as the mouthpiece of the great dream, as welcoming the coming guest. It is clear that Jung here uses the coming guest as a metaphor for the essential nature of what visited him all those years ago, beginning in 1912. And here, Jung says it is the artist who welcomes the coming guest. To me, this points to the unfolding enantiodromia of Jung's complex against modern art. It is implicit that Jung declares himself an artist and his art as welcoming the arrival of the coming guest. Okay, so you want to comment on this?
Yeah, and I like that he's elucidated. This is Jung's complex talking. So this is, in that sense, also Jung's bias, where in a sense, Jung's being dragged forward, like being dragged behind a horse by this complex, where in one sense, there's just professional jealousy of other artists. And my way is the only way, which is really interesting because it's kind of antithetical to Jung's dignity and difference typically. He usually approaches these things where I'm not right and wrong, and you're not right and wrong, and let's connect and communicate and learn about this psyche thing. Where here, he's in a sense really taken over. I wouldn't go so far as to say possessed, but that's kind of what a complex is.
Right. And Jung, so Jung is basically saying that artwork needs to be photographic to reflect the physical world. And yet his own work is abstract in many ways, some of it in the Red Book.
Yeah.
And I don't think he fully realized that.
Well, it's interesting. I think you're right because like some of it, like when you see him small and then Istabar big, it's kind of that's a stick figure kind of composition. And then you get the sacred geometry mandalas, and then you get the boat and the dragons with the flowing. Those are three different styles.
Yeah, and so I understand Jung's own limitation at the time. Yeah. Okay, when he was reacting to the Armory show, it was unlike anything that he had ever seen. Okay, and he was used to this view in Europe that an artist should work like a camera and express something in the physical world, and that's not what modern art does. Okay?
Right.
Modern art expresses something in the non-physical world typically, and years later, if Carl Jung and I had this conversation near the time of his death, if that would have been possible, he would agree with me, I'm sure. But
Well,
anyway.
and I think he was startled too, because I think for example, I know when I see true beauty that I've never seen before, there's a certain terrified, startled, irritated quality. And what I've come to know, if I feel like stirred up by some kind of image.
Yeah.
Well, what happens? It's T-boning me with beauty that I've never seen before. So it's nature coming in a sense, with a sneak attack. But now I know when I feel that to just sit in it and let the weather wash through because I'm about to learn something. But
Yeah.
initially, I would be, oh, that's horrible. I mean, how could we have that? And I would, in my 20s and my 30s, ideologically, oh, that's bad art. And then you get into the philosophy of, what's even art, much less good and bad. So it's interesting here to see in a sense, the purity of the initial expression of Jung towards modern art.
Yeah. August Moon says, did Jung have a formal art education mentoring? I would say it was very limited, probably. But he was drawn to it. And um, and obviously the Red Book is full of paintings that Jung did. I want
Well,
to,
growing up with money, I would say too, growing up with money, he probably was steeped in a lot of portraiture. You have the portraits of the family on the wall kind of thing. And so seeing that is, well, then it must be reality. Either he kind of had a normalcy to that's what it was.
yeah. I want to make everybody aware because I think this is an idea that needs to be spread around the world. I had an epiphany this week, and it was based on research done in Anne Arundel Public Schools, Anne Arundel County Public Schools, where I work currently. And that was based on tradition and years of work going back thousands of years. But every Wednesday, our faculty is required to arrive at school at 8 a.m. Okay, and this happened to be a Tuesday, but we're required to arrive at 8 a.m. so that we can have professional development before school. And on this particular day, which was quote unquote Unity Day, the kids get a 2 hour early dismissal, but the faculty is required to stay for professional development. So in the morning session, the 1 hour session in the morning, they presented um, they presented research that demonstrated that if students would meditate in some way for 5 minutes at the beginning of school every day, it reduced behavioral referrals by 54%. 54%. It's just an incredible number. Now,
And to
so
clarify,
pardon?
margin of error is 3 to 7. So anything over 3 to 7 is a number.
Yeah.
54 is substantially above 3 to 7%.
Well, and I have no doubt about this, and I do know
Yeah.
that yoga and meditation has been spreading through the American school system over the last 20, 30 years. Um, but interestingly, in the afternoon, the 2 hour session, uh, everyone was supposedly required to do yoga, and they had actually brought yoga mats, and they did a guided visualization as people were doing yoga, lying on the floor, including the principal was right next to me doing it. Okay, but as some of you know, I am permanently disabled in the sense that I can't bend down anymore. I have 3 joint replacements, and if I fall down or lie down on the floor, I could not get up. And I'm heavy enough over 200 so that it's an issue. And so when I went into the room, uh, I got a chair to sit in, and I had known that we were going to do yoga. So what I did was I went to the art room and I got myself a large piece of watercolor paper and one brown colored pencil, just one pencil. And so as this yoga instructor was doing the yoga visualization, I simply allowed myself to doodle on this piece of paper. And I don't think I kept even a picture of it because I gave this to the woman at the end. But I did one of my typical doodles, which is preparatory to what I do in my painting. And this visualization went on for about an hour, and I wasn't drawing a picture of the visualization. I was simply allowing my hand to move wherever it suggested it wanted to move, or wherever it did move. Um, and at the end of it, the woman said, "Oh my God, can I keep this?" And she says, "I want to put this up in my room." Okay, so the point that I want to make is that I don't think she quite rocked it yet, but we know from psychological research over many years that humans take in information in three primary ways, either auditory, visual, or kinesthetic. And it occurred to me that what they're doing in yoga is kinesthetic, certainly. But if students were allowed to do something visual or auditory, for example, um, you know, play with drums or whatever it is, or play with a recorder in the morning. If they went to the music room instead and just fiddled with musical instruments without being told what to do, just you're in the music room, here's the music equipment, knock yourselves out.
Right.
And maybe you want to shut the door during that, we'll be back in 10 minutes type
Well, with
thing, right?
like drums, like nunchucks, be careful. You might actually knock yourself out. So,
But you could do that, and for the painting, if you wanted to go to the art room, and you would be provided with watercolor paper and a cheap set of watercolors, and you could paint on that, and you could paint on it every day until it's finished for 10 minutes a day. That would be equivalent to what they're doing with yoga. And so I do think that that's an insight. I'm not sure anybody is doing it yet in the country, recognizing that the yoga is equivalent to these other two things. Okay.
and that also the whole peace of mind piece. That's why instead of medication, exercise gets you going. Your systems have to operate. You aspirate, you breathe more deeply when you're moving.
Yeah.
And because your body knows I need oxygen, I need to aspirate. And not like silent aspirate, like burping up stuff. The breathing aspiration, like how an engine aspirates to work. And the yoga, the meditation, anything focused and active is that. And it's so healthy because I think what happens is you balance out the chaos and the interference patterns
Yeah.
so that you're not subject to your own storms. You're the eye in your storm.
Yeah. So just to imagine that from this time forward, somebody who is listening to this recording or this presentation live now takes this forward into other places. Maybe we could have a quantitatively significant improvement in behavior in our schools, and the follow-on to that is an improvement in society. Um, and it would just happen unconsciously. If we only devoted not 5 minutes a day, but let's say 10 to 15 minutes a day. You can either go to the gym and work on yoga, or you can go to the art room and work on a watercolor, or if you have to use your hands, you can work on a clay sculpture or something. And you can go to the art room and fiddle around with the instruments, whatever you want to do.
Well, and
Um,
I think China and other countries have education systems where there are no tests until fourth grade, and they have all this hands-on stuff and exercises and coordinated physical events.
yeah,
And what's happening,
yeah.
you're using your energy, and so
Hmm.
you don't have to blow off steam. And if you look at a cat as it's an analogy, they have the kitty crazies once a day.
Yeah.
They're and they're running around, and they're on a tear, and then they go take a nap. But what happens is they don't have the overage that kind of will drive you crazy if you don't let it run.
Well, and what you said brought to my mind the possibility that we could have service dogs that people could just come in and pet in the morning for,
Which calms the heart.
yeah, for for a few minutes. Service dogs or service cats that would do just that.
And I think that's bringing nature in,
And it would
which
be very easy to get people to volunteer to bring dogs or cats into the school.
yeah,
You could
and
get
you're
you could
bringing nature in, and I think that inspires people and also chills them out. But by
yeah,
chilling out doesn't mean relaxed. I think that chilling out intensifies you to whatever level you're at, but it self-regulates because higher or lower, wherever your RPMs run, you balance out there.
yeah.
And that chill doesn't mean sitting still. It just means a silence and a calm that actually I think becomes more highly observant and experiential and probably connected.
Yeah, but as Richard says, meditational music, but I'm not even saying meditational music. I'm not requiring that it be that. It can be literally anything that's sound oriented.
Yeah.
Whether it's pounding on a drum or playing on a flute or a xylophone or you name it.
Well, listening
Whatever
to your own
whatever floats your
heart.
boat, you
Yeah.
know.
Listening to the music of your own heartbeat and your
Yeah.
breath. I mean, you always have those tools.
Well, yeah, and Qigong was mentioned here, and that would be one for the kinesthetic side, but it doesn't have to be a specific one, is what I'm
Right.
saying. Okay, it
Yeah,
can
whatever
be
floats your boat.
whatever floats your boat for 15 minutes right at the beginning of school. I bet it'd improve our behavior at least 50%, as the
54%. Yeah.
statistics prove. Okay, so we have one more page to this essay. I'm going to finish it here. All right, the next paragraph shows perhaps the last vestige of Jung's railing against the negative aspects of modern art as showing, quote, the intensity of our prejudice against the future, unquote. This mischaracterizes the very nature of modern art, particularly its prophetic aspects, described by Kandinsky and others. The following paragraph articulates Jung's new voice about what is at issue. Quote, what is the great dream? It consists of the many small dreams and the many acts of humility and submission to their hints. It is the future and the picture of the new world, which we do not understand yet. We cannot know better than the unconscious and its intimations. There is a fair chance of finding what we seek in vain in our conscious world. Where else could it be? Unquote. To me, this is Jung's best description, not only of the major purpose of his work, but also of the nature of what he was doing in those early years that became the origin of his later and most profound work. This also indicates that each person can can do, what each person can do to welcome the coming guest. It is an individual task. This individual task of welcoming the coming guest is the key to how the Red Book can be considered a guide in the coming time. It shows how Jung welcomed the coming guest and serves as a reminder to all of what is possible. Each person in welcoming the coming guest will have a different and unique experience. This is as it needs to be and as it should be. Jung's crucial point is made unmistakably by Harold Rosenberg. Quote, art consists of one-person creeds, one psyche cultures. Its direction is toward a society in which the experiences of each will be the ground of a unique, inimitable form. In short, a society in which everyone will be an artist. Art in our time can have no other social aim. An aim dreamed of by modern poets from Lautréamont to Whitman, Joyce, and the Surrealists, and which is embodied in the essence of the continuing revolt against domination by tradition. Yes, the artist is the artist in each of us. A few months before Jung died, he received a gift from a young artist as an expression of gratitude for Jung's work. It is an abstract painting. Jung wrote back to the artist and said, the religious view of the world thrown out at the front door creeps in again by the back, albeit in strangely altered form, so altered that nobody has yet noticed it. Thus does modern art celebrate the great carnival of God, unquote. Jung's inner battle with modern art was done. Its enantiodromia complete. Do what you can now to welcome the coming guest.
Amen.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is.
And thank you to Russell Lockhart, who was a passing acquaintance of me online. Thank you for writing that, because it's a reconfirmation of everything we've been saying during this session.
Yeah, and it's so well said too. I don't have any comments at that. I'm gonna just kind of say
Right.
amen on what a beautiful statement.
Okay, so we were reading in this book, Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions, edited by Mary Stein and Thomas Arst. This is volume number 1. There are 5 volumes and about 70 essays in total. We have been reading one of them by Russell Lockhart. And so next week, I'm sorry, we are done for 3 weeks.
Yep.
Because I will not be available next week. And so we're going to take a 3-week holiday as of now. And we will be back after the first of the year. And let's look at the calendar and just figure out what the date will be. And just see if I can get this quickly. All right, so we are
12th.
At the 14th, or I'm sorry, the 15th. So we're taking this 22nd and the 29th off. And so we will be the 5th of January for the next session. And at the next session, we will be, and by the way, there are lots, Russell Lockhart filled this essay with lots of wonderful footnotes, so I urge you to take a look at that. And the next essay is entitled, This Incandescent Matter, Shudder, Shimmer, Stammer, Solitude. Josephine Evitz Secker is the author of this essay. And I'm just making sure that I've read it. Yes, I have. Okay. All right. Um, so anyway, because let's see. Okay, well, there's been a very active discussion going on the YouTube channel, which I urge you all to read. I can't read everything, and so I'm going to pass. I wish everyone a very happy holiday season. Um, please take a breather and um, try to integrate some of the things that we've talked about here. And we'll be back on January 5th. Is that okay with you, Jordan?
Perfect.
Okay. See you in 3 weeks, everybody. Peace.